Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Not to be confused with Ryan Nelson, my co-host book, it's Your Fiscal Physical, 7 Keys to Becoming Financially Fit. Find that on Amazon. It's always a tongue twister when I say that there, but highly recommend you guys check out that book. And I happen to be here with the author today. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Living the dream over here, as some might say. So, but today we're going to jump into a topic on GDP, or gross domestic product. So hopefully that really invites everybody. You guys are locked in from minute one here. But Ryan, do you know a little bit about GDP?
Very little.
Okay, perfect. Now we're talking. Yeah. But I do think it is one for myself. Like, you might have said that facetiously, but I actually I hear that word thrown out quite a bit, and like I Googled it about like, hey, what does this actually mean? How do you kind of break it down? And I was like, hey, you know what? I think this could fall into like our bucket of financial literacy that I think would be pretty good to kind of break down for us here. So I'll turn it over to you to start with the basics and see where we kind of lead here.
Yeah. So like you already said, so GDP stands for gross domestic product. And it's the value of all goods and services a country produces in a year. Okay. So the value of all goods and services a country produces in a year. So you can kind of think of it as like the country's annual report card from a production standpoint. And so it effectively exists to measure the size and overall health of a country's economy. So it would be hard to know how does Italy's economy compare to Uruguay's economy?
Sure. Nice. Yeah.
Hard to tell.
I don't know.
Yeah. But GDP gives us a structure in which to compare the size of those two economies. So you would just look at the value of all the goods and services each country produces in that year. And then it also gives us a tool to compare, if we take, say, the U.S., how does the U.S.'s economy compare in, say, 2026 to 2025 or 2027? Sure. Is it growing? Is it shrinking, right? So we can see if we're continually, if the value of our goods and services are continually increasing, or are they decreasing? So it just gives us a tool to compare country to country and even inside the same country year to year. So it also is useful for lawmakers and economists and investors to understand our economy growing or shrinking. And then it helps set the stage for decisions like the Fed. Are they going to raise interest rates or lower interest rates? Is the government going to be, as they're trying to create their budget and spend, what are they going to spend money on and how much can they spend? They would use, things like our GDP as one of many variables to help determine all of those decisions.
Yeah, no, that's a cool kind of way to break it. I like the report card aspect of it, because most everybody has received a report card in some case, and you're like, cool, like I'm getting an A or I'm getting a B. But I also feel like with the report card, it doesn't capture. I feel like probably with this there's certain things it doesn't capture, does capture too. So I'm curious to have you see if you can break down like what is in there and what is not, I guess, when it comes to that report card, if you will.
Perfect. So I think a simple way to think about GDP would be using like a spending approach. So you add up everything that the people, the businesses, and the government spend, right? So this would be like consumer spending, business investments, government spending, and then you'd also look at our exports. So what are other countries spending on our goods, right? And minus our imports. So if we're spending money on a computer from China, that doesn't help our GDP, that helps their GDP, right? So you think of just all the spending on all the U.S. goods in services, and that is effectively the value. So the value would be all the spending. So another way to think about this, or a different approach, would be just think about all the money that's being spent on the services and goods of our country. So again, any exports would be another country buying our goods. That would count towards our GDP. Cool. Yeah. Anything we spend on another country's goods, that would be subtracted from our GDP because it's not spent on our value. So things like cars, healthcare services, groceries, financial services, construction, travel, manufacturing, all of those would be examples of things that would count towards our GDP. Obviously, unpaid work, there's no value being assigned to it. Used goods, they're not going to contribute to our GDP. Transferring money, like buying a stock, does not contribute to our GDP. If I go buy a stock, there hasn't been any service or value exchange, service or good exchanged. So anytime you're just transferring assets or buying used goods, those are not going to be counted in our GDP. So we'll leave it at that for now. Yeah. But so what GDP can tell us is, if GDP is growing, so if it's steadily getting larger, it's going to signal a healthy, what we would call expanding economy. If GDP slows down or shrinks, potentially it's an indication of trouble, such as a recession. And in fact, a recession is typically defined by GDP. We can talk about that a little bit later. We can do it now. So a recession is defined as 2 quarters of shrinking GDP. So typically, there's not been a great definition of this, and it seems the benchmark has seemed to have changed a little bit, but largely a lot of people consider if there's 2 quarters of GDP decline, that's when they would consider a recession. But anyways, back to what GDP can tell us. So if a strong GDP growth, if there's strong GDP growth, it can lead to more jobs and rising incomes. Whereas again, weaker GDP growth can lead to layoffs or slower wage growth. So ultimately, if you kind of think about everything we just talked about, so this can affect job security, wages, mortgage rates, your investment returns, your retirement savings, therefore. So it can have a large impact on, you as a citizen of a given country. It can have a large impact on your day-to-day living. So when GDP slows, companies are going to be less likely to effectively be investing, which can mean that their market returns could be slower. It means that, again, they may be hiring less people. They may be more inclined to lay off people, things like that. So some things, I'll give you a little quiz here. Oh, fun. So I don't know if you can see this or not, so hopefully you can't. But so here, I'll give you a couple of examples, and you pick which ones increase GDP and what doesn't increase GDP. Okay. All right. So let's say a kitchen remodel. If I go remodel my kitchen, does that boost GDP or not?
That does boost GDP, because if you paid for like the services, and so if you had like a company come and like remodel your kitchen, then I'd say that it would boost. You buy the lumber, you buy the cabinets, whatever it might be to do that. So I would say that would affect it. Perfect.
Let's say I go out to dinner, go buy some dinner.
Yes, I think that would affect it as well too, because you're buying the food or goods and services. Yeah.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
2 for 2. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. And that's all we got for today, guys.
Exactly. Let's say I go buy a used car.
No, because we just covered the used piece of it. I think that was one of the things that you said. So if it's like secondhand things, then
So if you buy a used car, it would not boost GDP because the GDP was basically counted when the car was first made.
I was going to say, because in my mind, I was just like, wait a minute, like that technically is like a service, but since it's already like, it can only be counted once, I suppose.
Yeah, so it can get tricky. Exactly.
Yeah.
So exactly. So if producing the car increased GDP in the year it was produced, but then if that car gets sold every single year for the next 20 years, it's not creating more value every single year. You can't sell a car every day and it create that much more value. So exactly. Yeah. So good catch there. So buying a new car
definitely. You would.
Does increase. Yep, exactly. So good job.
Well, interesting. That's interesting to think about. Like, it's like, oh, cool. You just get it once kind of thing. Like when it comes to those. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, exactly. So, kind of if we were to summarize all of this, so, like you said, you kind of like that scorecard analogy. GDP is essentially that scorecard for the nation's economy. It can help explain things like why interest rates might raise or fall when the Fed is making their decision. That's going to be an element they're deciding. They're looking at how the quote unquote economy is doing, what the GDP is it going up, is it going down, is it staying steady, and that's going to help inform their decision if they should increase or decrease rates or just keep them the same. And then I would say. Yeah, ultimately, one thing I would, if we almost separate ourselves a little from GDP here real quick, though, maybe if we were to summarize everything, GDP, it's a cool report card, right, so to speak. It gives us a cool idea of what's happening in the market, right, the value of that country's services and goods. What I would say, if you're going to try to apply this to like investing in retirement planning, I would say sometimes it might be too easy to see or hear that GDP is going down and then make investment decisions based on that, right? And I would say if we just thought about everything we just talked about, we could see how GDP impacts a lot of things throughout the country, including job security and wages and all that stuff. What I didn't mention is anything related to, say, your retirement goals, right? And so what I would say is like the things you can control, things like your savings rates, what you're investing in, like doing tax planning, like having a disciplined investment approach. You should maintain a disciplined investment approach, whether GDP is going up, whether GDP is going down, whether GDP is holding flat, whether GDP is oscillating between high and low, right? Like it shouldn't really necessarily matter. Your investment approach should have a longer term approach that's focused on your goals. And it's maybe wise not to focus too much on GDP when it comes to investing. But GDP itself is a great economic indicator to know what the economy is doing.
Sure. So that's interesting. That's it, because it's like the separation of those two, yet they're like kind of intertwined, I suppose.
For sure.
Like, but I think that you mentioned at the end of this podcast all the time, like staying the course with like
exactly
cool. Like if we have 2 quarters where it's like the GDP's down or something like that, is that going to change my retirement goals? Probably not. Like, is that over the long term, over 30 years? Could it impact somebody who's maybe retiring like in a month though? Maybe like it could have some impact on that, but if your plan is done correctly, if you are thinking about these things and such too, like hopefully this is all built in, like to the ups and downs of just like how things work, like when it comes to that. I would hope so. If you have a good financial planner or advisor, for sure. So
yep, absolutely. Yeah. So that's GDP in a nutshell.
Awesome, man. That was super cool. That was neat. I do remember just a quick little story. When I was in college, I took a geography course, and we got assigned like a country to like to go over whatever, and I got assigned the country of Chad, which is in Africa. Yeah. It was like I'd heard the name, but I was like, I don't know where the heck the place is or whatever. And like we had to do like the report on like the GDP and talk about like, and it was so hard to figure out. Like this is back in like 2010. There is not a lot going on in Chad.
That's funny.
Like at all. And I remember like we had to give this presentation. I was just scrambling to figure out like fill stuff versus like, not a lot going on here kind of thing. And I'd be curious to see like 15 years later, like where that sits. But at the time I was like, this is like the most, but one of the things was GDP. And I remember like reporting on it, and it wasn't, at the time it was not very high. and I was like, cool, like Chad, not the most stuff going on here. So, but it is interesting to think about how those certain countries, like, can you measure certain things? Sure, but like, does it measure happiness? Does it measure these other things? Well, hard to doesn't capture everything, but it can give you kind of a good picture there. So,
yeah. Did we ever talk on the podcast about gross domestic happiness?
I don't think so.
There's
a measure for that.
I think if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be butchering this, and I'm just trying to verify. But anyways, so there's a country called Bhutan, and I believe they refuse to measure gross domestic GDP. And instead they measure gross domestic happiness.
Okay.
And so I don't know. They have some. I don't know exactly know the process, but they have some philosophy to measure the happiness of their country, and kind of interesting. Yeah. Completely different approach.
Really just kind of going against the the norm with that, but Yes, I mean, I don't know. Like, do you just take polls of people to see, hey, are you happy?
I honestly can't remember. I think they have some objective measures around like mental well-being, like as far as like diagnoses and like things in their economy. Or I don't know. I don't know enough about it to speak educatedly. But if anybody's curious, you can go. You can look up Bhutan's gross domestic happiness, and then you can call in and inform us.
Yeah, just please let us know. We'd love to hear that for sure. So awesome, Ryan. Well, appreciate it, man. We'll go ahead and pause right here. Be back on the other side with some personal stuff. Everybody, hang tight.
And now to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back, everybody, to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. I am here with Ryan, and I got a food question for you, Ryan. You ready to answer this?
Absolutely.
All right. So, what is your go-to road trip snack? So, say you're hopping in the car, you're driving over here in Reno. We're about 3.5, 4 hours from the Bay Area. You're going over to San Francisco for the day. You're driving over. You got like 4 hours to kill in the car. Like, what would you? You're like, I need a snack here. What would you pack?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Or eat. Yeah,
it's a tough question. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, gotta get some water in the car, but
naturally,
I'm gonna go with. I love beef jerky. You can't go wrong with beef jerky. But for some reason, for long drives, I also like sunflower seeds.
Oh, nice, excellent choice.
Yeah. It's like it's a process.
Yes,
it's a much slower process, and it's more of a distraction maybe than something like beef jerky. Yeah. But I also love like the trolley. Is it trolley or trolley? But the sour gummy worms.
Oh yeah, the gummy worms. Yeah. Oh, those are delicious.
So
too.
I don't know about one, but those would be my top three: beef jerky, the sour gummy worms, and sunflower seeds. What about you?
That's good. Beef jerky for sure. Like
classic.
I rarely eat beef jerky, like just in general. But if I'm going on a road trip and we're like getting ready to go, I was like, oh, gotta get some beef jerky. I was like, and I'm like, why did I need that just for this? Like, but it's delicious. I also really like, I don't know. Have you ever had wasabi peas?
Like dried peas?
Yeah, dried peas.
I don't think so. No.
So at Winco, or at least they used to have like the bins there. They still have and you can get dried wasabi peas. And I would go and like get them, and they like. You've obviously had wasabi, I would assume, and they like give you that little burn in your nose, and like so for some reason, like they are just like an excellent, like if you're ever tired on a road trip or you're just trying to mix it up a little bit, you pop a couple wasabi peas, and they just like whoa, like,
interesting,
just get you going. So it's like an energy drink, but just through food kind of thing. So
that's funny.
I've never eaten them outside of a road trip though. I don't just like regularly just buy wasabi peas and eat them, but. It's kind of a weird one, kind of like how I like the smell of fresh tires.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many people would have said wasabi peas for a road trip snack.
No double bubble for you, huh?
You know, I love double bubble. I've really tried to swear it off though as much as possible because my jaw gets sore. Yeah. and I don't know if I have like I grind my teeth at night or something, but like I can't chew as much double bubble as I used to.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
I love that stuff though. If anybody's looking to get me a gift at some point, that just give me a thing of double bubble.
There you go.
Or maybe don't. Maybe I shouldn't. Don't do that. Yeah. Just email us at podcast@Alchemy Wealth Management. What your road trip snack is, and I'd be curious to see what everybody else thinks there. But awesome, Ryan. Appreciate you sharing as always. Appreciate the insight on this episode here. And as we normally do, I'll turn it over to you to play us out.
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.